Don't click away. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a multi-billion-dollar machine hiding right in front of us. This explainer isn't just another piece of AI slop. It's a highly researched, educational, and factual look at where the money behind mass incarceration actually goes. We are going to follow the money. We are talking about $538.2 million. That massive figure, that represents the 2025 second quarter revenue for just one single private prison company, CoreCivic. Over $500 million generated in literally just 3 months. Now, contrast that insane corporate wealth with this incredibly small number, $17. That is exactly what it costs an incarcerated person to make a basic 15-minute phone call to their family in the state of Georgia. How do these two completely different financial realities even exist in the exact same system? Well, that is exactly what we are going to map out today. First, the prison industrial complex. Second, decades of mass incarceration. Third, the business of detention. Fourth, influencing laws. And finally, nickel and diming inmates. Look, we put a massive amount of effort into researching these topics, and while we might not be able to afford the fanciest video editing machine in the world, we let the facts speak for themselves. If you appreciate that, please hit the like button right now. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the prison industrial complex. To really understand the math here, we first need to understand the machine. The prison industrial complex is defined as the overlapping interests of government and industry that use surveillance, policing, and imprisonment as solutions to economic, social, and political problems. Think of it as an interlocking network where government systems and private industry team up, and where human confinement generates absolute piles of money. Just to comprehend the sheer macro scale of the system, we're talking about overall costs reaching at least $445 billion every single year. And yes, that's funded heavily by your taxpayer dollars. Inside that massive bubble, the system generates roughly $11 billion in revenue from prison labor alone. Which brings us smoothly to Section 2, decades of mass incarceration. Before we get into the timeline, drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts on how we got to these numbers. So let's walk through this chronologically. It's like a domino effect starting in the 1970s with the declaration of the war on drugs, which brought us mandatory minimum sentences. As populations naturally started to swell, states desperately needed beds. That leads right into 1983, when the Corrections Corporation of America, which we now know as CoreCivic, was founded on the promise that they could do it cheaper. Then, bam, 1994. The historic crime bill injects nearly $10 billion into prison construction and rolls out 3 strikes laws. Fast forward to 2025, and we've got nearly 2 million people locked up across the U.S. Tougher federal laws and corporate privatization basically grew hand in hand to build this infrastructure. Now, what's really interesting about this slide from the Prison Policy Initiative is who exactly is filling up those beds. The system does not hit everyone equally. It disproportionately impacts the absolute poorest individuals in our society, particularly women and minority communities. These economic and racial disparities aren't a coincidence. They're woven directly into the fabric of these historical trends. And if you look at the latest 2025 data, we're seeing a stark reversal of the downward trends we had just a few years ago. ICE detention populations alone skyrocketed 58% since 2024. State prisons added over 50,000 people across 2022 and 2023, totally undoing the drops we saw during the pandemic. Even youth confinement is ticking back up after 2 full decades of steady decline. Overall populations are surging. With populations surging like that, we have to ask, who's managing all these people? Let's move to Section 3, the business of detention. Let's objectively put public prisons and private for-profit prisons side by side. Private prisons were originally pitched with this big promise of cost savings, but the data shows they actually end up costing states way more in the long run. Why? Well, they cut operational costs by offering lower guard pay and reduced training, which directly correlates with more violence. Furthermore, private facilities consistently pump out higher recidivism rates, meaning folks are more likely to return, costing the state more over time. Researchers at The Ohio State University Moritz College of Law hit the nail on the head in a recent paper. They found that the minute a private corporation takes over, making money inherently becomes the primary focus of the model, rather than rehabilitation. The financial incentive is tied to keeping beds full, not emptying them out through successful reform. If you're finding this explainer eye-opening so far, please share it with a friend as we head into Section 4, Influencing Laws and Sentences. Because here's where it gets wild. Private prison companies don't just sit back and passively receive inmates as they come through the justice system. The research shows they actively work to mold the very system that sends people there in the first place. And this brilliantly illustrates the three distinct ways the industry ensures they never run out of customers. First, heavy lobbying for tougher, longer sentencing laws. Second, buying direct access, pouring over $6.9 million into political campaign contributions since 2000. Third, and this is terrifying, internalized judicial bias. Studies actually show that when a private prison opens in a jurisdiction, judges subconsciously internalize those promised cost savings and hand out harsher sentences, adding an average of 23 days to a person's sentence simply because the private facility is sitting right there in town. So we've seen the massive macro level. Let's zoom in to the micro level in Section 5, nickel and diming inmates. Let's examine how this system shifts the financial burden directly onto the absolute poorest families for basic necessities. Look at this comparison we put together for digital goods. Out here in the free world, you can download a song on iTunes for about 99 cents. But in the prison commissary, operated by private vendors, a single MP3 track from Keef can cost $1.85. It's a completely captive market. These companies jack up prices for inmates who are often earning as little as $1 for an entire day of prison labor. So the crucial point is how this monopolization plays out across different states. In Massachusetts, a 15-minute phone call costs about $2.36. But in Georgia, that exact same call is $17. State-sanctioned telecom monopolies promise massive kickbacks to state prison systems to win these exclusive contracts. Those kickbacks artificially inflate the prices, leaving the families who are just trying to maintain contact footing the bill. The Prison Policy Initiative sums it up perfectly. Quote, "Prisons shift the costs of incarceration to incarcerated people and their families, often enriching private companies in the process." Unquote. That is the economic reality. The poorest families are quite literally subsidizing corporate profit margins and state budgets. I want to leave you with a provocative question to really chew on. If the stated goal of our justice system is supposed to be rehabilitation, what happens to that goal when human confinement becomes a highly profitable, multi-billion-dollar industry? The incentive structure of justice gets turned completely upside down. Thank you so much for exploring this complex topic with me today. Make sure to hit subscribe to keep unpacking these systems with us, and click right here on the screen to watch our next explainer.